Content presented in Cheshire Corners is for educational and informational purposes only. Please consult a legal professional if you have any questions or concerns about the content of this disclaimer, this series, or the legal implications surrounding psychedelic substances in your jurisdiction.
My therapist asked me, Greg, when you're, feeling an emotion, where do you feel this emotion in your body? And I looked at her like she had three heads. I didn't get it. The question didn't make sense. It just didn't compute. And that's because I wasn't feeling anything in my body.
But that's not a rule, that's a guideline. Being a mycologist is a lot like being a pirate. It's like, oh, there are rules, but they're really more like guidelines. And sometimes when you break the rules, you find new rules to follow that are actually more efficient. So a lot of the times when people will tell me a rule in mycology, I ask myself why. And if there isn't a well-substantiated reason why not to do something.
And the only reason why this actually has the scientific name of echinopsis is because a few scientists one day decided that these two very different types of cacti have a similar looking flower. So because their flower looks the same, they must be the same species. No DNA testing, no lineage, nothing. So these are what echinopsis look like. They are very small cactuses with lots of ribs and lots of spines. They look nothing like the cacti that are psychedelic. They are not tall columns. They are not columnars. Those are echinopsis, which is why the scientists got it wrong, trying to call them Brigesi.
Many people may not know, but there's actually over 200 species of psychedelic mushrooms. And so I think most people are familiar with Psilocybe cubensis, or they're just familiar with psychedelic mushrooms. Like, that's just what they are. Like, they're not aware that there's a vast number of species. This was supposed to be a graphical representation of a chart that kind of breaks down the different species of psychedelic mushrooms. It basically shows that, there's genus and species. And so if we're talking about psychedelic mushrooms, the largest group of psychedelic mushrooms is Psilocybe.
Just hanging out, talking. We gave a talk earlier.
I would just say,
I don't know. Just watching it evolve. I mean, I can't believe that this is real. Like, we get to just do this. We can just hang out, grow psychedelics, share them with our friends, and share strategies and figure out how to grow the new, harder to grow mushrooms. I really want to figure out how to grow Psilocybe neohalapensis. That's kind of like the white whale or whatever, the one I'm chasing. because I've heard it feels like totally different than other species, and it's been fun trying all the different species and seeing their, own unique characteristics that they have. It's almost like taking different substance, and I guess in essence it is, because they all have a different minor alkaloid profile that augments the psilocin when you combine them.
This man's last year got it over 6%. It's quite crazy, this variance, and we've seen other mushrooms change 1%, 2%, and 3% that we'll kind of get to next year that are really cool.
Letter explains that imagination in itself is freedom, is leaving Egypt. When you exercise your imagination, you are doing a leaving of Egypt. Why? Our bodies are time-bound. Our bodies are geographically bound. Our bodies are physical. Which part of ourselves has the ability to imagine? And the depth of imagination is you transport yourself from whatever situation you're in and bring yourself to somewhere entirely different. That's only our spirit can do. Our spirit is not limited, is not inhibited by the confines of time and space. How is your schedule? How is your day looking like? Because sometimes, he says, the inner harmony depends on the outer harmony. And when our outer life is chaotic, that automatically, we're one person, right? That automatically will cause inner chaos. Now, the catch is that the inner chaos doesn't say, hey, I'm here because there's no schedule. The inner chaos starts telling you a story about your childhood, it starts telling you a story about your career, it starts telling you a story about your relationships. But at the bottom of it is really just a symptom of the outer chaos in your life. And if the person would say that actually my schedule has been in ruins, you say, before we get deep, let's try to improve the schedule step by step. And let's see how you feel in a month, 2 months. And obviously very often people would, once the schedule is put back into place and you start feeling back that balance, that health just reemerges in a person. So I'm just starting from the most practical, pragmatic piece of advice that Rabbi so often brought up. He said, before we go deep, let's just check the framework of your life. The blessings are for the most simple, basic things. Thank you, God, that I'm able to open my eyes. Thank you, God, that I've closed. Thank you, God, that I could stand up straight. And those are the things that we forget. We take them for granted and we feel like we're entitled. But if we have a little humility, and that's another teaching of the Hasidic masters, humility equals joy, which is weird, because you would think humility is kind of a more, like a debt going down, and joy feels like a more going up type of emotion. They seem to be going in different directions, but the Hasidic masters teach, based on a verse in Isaiah actually, that no, humility is key to joy. Why? Because when you're humble, you realize the gifts. You realize you're not entitled. And when we feel ourselves in a more arrogant way, we always feel like we don't have enough. We don't have enough to what we're worthy of. But when we're humble, we see, wow, I could open my eyes. Wow, I could walk. Oh, I'm gifted, I'm blessed. What do I have to complain about?
One of the things that people with depression have difficulty doing is to suppress depressive thoughts. And, what are depressive thoughts? Well, they're thoughts about yourself. I mean, that's, they're kind of self-referential thinking. Well, one of the things that, of course, we do, if you think about the default mode network and the fact that it has to do with self-referential thinking, one of the things that we do then routinely is when we engage in various tasks that don't have a particular self-referential nature, we tend to suppress these areas. And people have often used the phrase, you lose yourself in your work. So that if you engage in work and you become very focused on something, you tend to forget yourself.
The default mode network remains one of the great mysteries of modern neuroscience. Perhaps the most remarkable lesson of all is this: the brain is never truly at rest. Beneath every quiet moment exists a vast, dynamic internal universe, one continuously shaping the story of who we are.
There's a paradigm shift going on here in the way we think about the brain. That the focus has so long been on making the brain do things and ignoring what it's doing all the time. And this seems to me to reorganize that focus, that most of what the brain's doing, it's doing spontaneously all the time.
And I remember it so clearly. I remember where I was sitting. It was at my home office. And it just kind of, something hit me like a ton of bricks, just saying, something's got to change. If I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to be having the same experience. And most of it was related to my career. I am so blessed to have a soulmate as a wife and a beautiful family, and I live in Boulder, and I'm physically healthy and wonderful parents. So many blessings. And yet, ... something just didn't feel right. So after the third retreat, a month after, same thing. And this happened to be right around the time of the, close to the election at this point. And just as a marker to kind of really illustrate how challenging this was, the day the bill passed, which was about 4 days after the election, I was in bed, depressed, feeling like crap. And I got the news that the bill passed. And my mind knew that that was great, but that didn't at all help my depression. And so my father, who I mentioned is a therapist, describes depression in a really profound way. And he says that depression is like looking outside on a beautiful day. Your mind knows it's beautiful because it's sunny and blue sky and birds and butterflies, but you're wearing sunglasses. So you're seeing darkness, but your mind knows it's a beautiful day. So my mind knew election, hallmark legislation, really life-changing, generation-changing, hopefully society-changing. I won't say hopefully, it is changing society. This bill passed, and meanwhile I'm still feeling like shit. So that just is people who struggle with depression, they'll get it. They'll get it. So what did I do? That last 3 months of 2022 we're talking about, my intuition told me not to go back to ayahuasca, not at all because I didn't believe in it. I've gotten so much from that medicine, for sure. And at no point did I ever regret doing ayahuasca and doubting it and saying I should, this was my journey. And it meant I had more work to do. That's what it meant. And so those last 3 months were the lowest point in my life. If 10 is ultimate happiness and 0 is suicidal, I was at a 1. So suicidal thoughts sometimes, never ideation or making a plan. So I was never actually unsafe, but black hole, really, really, really bad. I start to get emotional when I even talk about it, which is okay. I decided to go a different path, and in 2023, I started using ketamine. And right after the new year, I went to a clinic where I did intramuscular ketamine, IM. And for listeners, it's doing a heavy dose of ketamine, and it's done in most cases. You do what's called an induction series, so that's 6 sessions in 2 weeks, and then you can go as often as every 3 weeks after. And that's what I did for 2 years. But after that first session, I walked out with a lift, just feeling better, just some relief. And it became very apparent to me how ketamine can save lives, because you can walk in suicidal and walk out not. And again, I didn't walk in suicidal, but pretty close. And I know enough and heard enough, and anecdotally in research studies that's the case. So I started using ketamine, going every 3 to 4 weeks for 2 years. 2 years. So I'm a big believer in ketamine. It's an amazing medicine. Not here to say it's better or worse than ayahuasca. It's another medicine. But continued. Well, an interesting thing happened after my induction series. I was feeling so great, and I woke up literally the weekend after that 6th session, and a new challenge happened, which is a good friend, anxiety. And it's not that I never struggled with anxiety, but depression was my thing. And my learning there was that the depression was masking anxiety. And also, so many people say that anxiety and depression are kind of two sides of the same coin, and I really do get that. They can kind of go back and forth. But this meant that then became my work, continue working with my anxiety. And so ketamine continued to help, stayed in therapy. I'm still in therapy to this day, and started working through the anxiety. And after 2 years, so now we're talking end of 24, I just reached a point with ketamine where I felt like I took it as far as it could go for me. After all the benefits, it was just like, I need to go a different path. That's kind of the best way to explain it. As grateful as I am for the benefits of ketamine.
Reacting to things is driven by conditioning and fear and past wounds. And responding to things is driven by awareness, intention, and presence. Responding versus reacting is one of the most transformative practices a person can integrate into their daily life. It helps us develop conscious choice. And conscious choice is where it replaces what used to be automatic behavior. They're going to temporarily change your perception in ways that are going to help you examine your deeply held thoughts and your deeply held belief systems and your deeply held emotions and all your deeply ingrained habits. And they're going to allow you to look at all of those from a different perspective.
And I think a lot of people experience feeling like they don't have choice in life, and psychedelics really, really unlock people's ability to feel empowered and to feel like they can be themselves and they can really be authentic to who they are and come to know themselves better and love themselves better. During this experience, I felt like I was having surgery. Like I felt there was a surgery happening on the inside of me. And I took a breath and I just like heard, whether it was from the mushrooms or from myself, and maybe it was both, I heard this like, we need to do this. This is important. You can handle it. You're going to be okay. I do think we live in a culture that has taught many of us to relate to ourselves transactionally, relate to ourselves like we're projects, problems to solve, symptoms to improve, symptoms to eliminate. It's kind of exhausting because then we're always going to be working towards something instead of working towards being more ourselves. What needs support instead of suppression? And what happens if I listen instead of override? Extended or unconscious material becomes much harder to avoid, and the nervous system starts communicating more loudly. I think irritation is information. I think it's also one of the first honest signals that we can experience. Mushrooms often increase our honesty before it increases comfort, and that can be really confronting. So when irritation arises, instead of, how do I get rid of this? Where have you been abandoning your own needs and wants and boundaries?
Only with this question. If you experience any issues receiving forms or navigating the software, please let our team know and we will assist you. For the purposes of tonight's demonstration,
so psilocybin occurs naturally in almost 300 mushroom species. Psilocybin is a neurotransmitter, an amino acid. It resembles serotonin. Now we learn more about these different networks of the brain. Most of the time, most of our brain activity is happening in this default mode network. This is a graph mapping traffic between, this was actually on LSD, but mapping traffic between brain cells not on LSD and then on LSD. Same thing happens on psilocybin. Psilocybin cup that happened in Colorado. The winning mushroom that was most potent was more than 60 times more potent than the least. And even the least was submitted to win the most potent mushroom, so it's not like a weak mushroom. And it was more than 8 times stronger than the average mushroom submitted for the competition. There's a great thing from the National Institutes of Health where they pulled together all the studies that had been published so far around microdosing to try and aggregate all the data that has been found. Over 70 studies and publications from last year, and they weren't really able to find really clear evidence of efficacy.
Even just one journey followed up with strong integration, that's where the medicine is unfolding itself there. So the journey itself is extremely important, but the follow-up work is where we tie it all together. I learned at a very early age how impactful the medicine can be. I realized that this was the person that I wanted to be. a type of growth and a type of pattern that was just so unique and so powerful. Psilocybin comes in and it quiets that default mode network, and it helps us to become more flexible in the brain. And this has all been shown on scans in the brain that this is true. This isn't guesswork. This is science.
In 2018, though, I experienced my grandfather's death, and he was dying from his own cancer diagnosis. And he experienced severe end-of-life anxiety, something that as a nurse for so many years, I had never experienced. And he never really came to accept death. He never accepted that he was dying, and he struggled to the very, very last breath he took. We live in such of this fear-based thought process around death. And I think it's that fear that is really instilled in us. Our Western medical model is not supporting death in a way that's, all they want to do is fix the body. How long can we make your body last, instead of thinking about that quality of life? Everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different journey. And when you come to plant medicine, the medicine gives you what you need to heal in that moment.
About a month after each retreat, my depression would come back. Slowly at first, and then kind of gaining steam. Very hard, disappointing. I did not expect my first retreat to be a one and done, or a silver bullet, or you're all set for life. Drink lemonade and puppy dogs and ice cream. That's from the movie Swingers. But it sucks when it happens. And
severe unresolved traumas, even. So there's certainly a lot of hope with psilocybin-assisted therapy in treating severe trauma, PTSD, complex PTSD. But it's of the medicines you can use to work with trauma, psilocybin is definitely one of the harder ones to work with. A lot of times, the psilocybin is sort of pushing energy through your system. Something is going to come up. It might be the trauma. Psilocybin is very, very good at drawing those things from your subconscious into your conscious, but it doesn't really do anything to make those things easier to do. And so if you're not working with a trauma-informed clinician or somebody who really is able to hold those states in these containers, you can really fracture and re-traumatize yourself with psilocybin. Set yourself up for success, having a positive mindset, entering the experience with openness and curiosity, not a rigid expectation of what it would be like, is always a good plan. I would avoid having an experience when you're particularly stressed out, anxious, or emotionally unstable. Psilocybin is a non-specific amplifier. The way you're feeling going into your experience will probably become more during your experience, and it's always good to come and make as best of a mindset as you can. Obviously, some people are intentionally using psilocybin to explore difficult experiences, mental health issues, and all that sort of stuff. So it's not the end of the world if you go into an experience stressed or anxious. You might just have to deal with whatever that is. Social environment. So you really want to have supportive people around, whether they're your friends that you really trust to hold you in a vulnerable state. One thing I really saw a lot of, especially while I was early in my tripping career, you'd occasionally be around people who had not really explored these states before and think it's fun to with you while you're on strains. I really advise knowing that people are going to treat the state you're in while you're off mushrooms with a lot of respect, because it could really go south. Also, being around people that you have issues with, that you don't like, that you don't feel safe with, it's really going to manifest itself in your experience of major way. So you want to have the right people around you. Some people really like to have a sober trip center. It's there the whole time to sort of keep the space tended, to support them if they're having a hard time. That's always a great idea. You really want to make sure, again, it's somebody who's familiar with what it's like to be on mushrooms and who has the right intentions towards you.
Because it's sentient, now you have something to be able to create a relationship with. And it's not a one-way relationship, it's a two-way relationship, because you are now having a relationship with another sentient being. And when you do that, you approach that relationship like you would any other relationship, with a clear eyes, with an open heart, with trust, with no malintent. You have to approach it with respect.
It has no brain, no neurons, and no central command center, yet it can explore its environment, respond to changing conditions, and coordinate activity across its network. Is that intelligence? Is it consciousness? Or are we projecting human qualities onto a remarkably adaptive living system?
My name's Riley, and I own Lucky Ranch Foraging Company in Evergreen, Colorado. I started it in 2023, and I was inspired to do so because I had listened to Jeff Ravage on the Mushroom Hour talk about cold fire projects, and I had experienced my first wildfire burning one of the most beautiful areas I'd ever lived in. And when I got to move to the Lucky Ranch, I asked myself, how can I help this piece of land exist for as long as possible? And I started learning about my own backyard. I started a classroom in Evergreen that functions as a community lab with 2 flow hoods, lots of workbenches, and multiple bag sealers, instructors, and teaching equipment so that we can flourish a community of kindness through fungi.
And a lot of people think that mushrooms cannot grow on conifer trees, but I'm here to tell you that they can if you let them gas long enough. And that's where they might not be the most efficient substrate for mushrooms, but if you're going after fire mitigation, you're trying to hold moisture in the ground, and you're trying to increase the mycelium and just how bioactive and available your land is, chipping up your trees so that they're not giant matchsticks in a forest so that you can make a mushroom bed is a pretty good thing to do with them. And that's how we got started here at the Lucky Ranch, is that we were trying to save the ranch with fire mitigation. So we started doing different fire mitigation techniques and offering classes to try to help afford it. So this is a good day to install our mushroom bed. This is what it looked like. And they took me in this dirty, weird exercise studio thing with no closets. And I stood in there and I said, oh my God, we can turn this into a laboratory. And then before I knew it, all these people were helping me that had volunteered for me previously to turn it into a lab. And this is my 3rd cup. And it's so cool to get to talk here because I was volunteering the first year, the second, I think I might've competed the second year, and then here we are now, but there's just so much growth and so much community to be had here.
How do we do myco-social work? That is the goal, right? Is to help at the end of the day. Kindness above everything. So whatever I'm doing that does need to make me money needs to be kind. I think that in the natural world destroys something else to create all of these benefits. And there's no value, no virtue attached to that. It's just a biological organism doing what it does.
Right. It's the circle of life.
That's exactly right. I have started boxing training, which is a fundraising fight that I'm going to do in June. Never boxed before. I'm now 40 years old, deciding to get hit in the face for the first time. We're
going to need a lot of cordyceps for that.
A lot. And so it's been helpful in the few classes I've done, getting up at 4 a.m. in the morning.
So when it comes to growing your own mushrooms, a lot of people will indicate that this is a difficult activity. It's something that you need to have a lot of equipment. You need to have a lot of experience, knowledge, good genetics. There's lots of perceived prerequisites to growing mushrooms. But really, when you want to grow mushrooms, all you need to do is have a sense of curiosity, a willingness to fail, and some patience, and you can get there.
Yep. And I don't know, anybody can learn how to do it. The barrier for entry for mycology isn't that high, and I think that that's one of the coolest things about the science. We were teaching people that these were plants until 1974. My grandpa still thinks I work with plants.
That's okay. Let them think that.
Yeah, you water them and they grow. They're plants. I'm like, okay, Bruce.
When it comes to growing your own mushrooms, you need 3 things. You need genetics, you need clean grain spawn, and you need substrate. Those are the only materials you need. A still air box, an FFU, laminar flow hood, all these things help and they increase your likelihood of success. But in order to get started in mycology, the only things that you need are a few supplies, a little bit of knowledge, and just a willingness to fail. Because that's the cool thing about mycology is when you fail, you didn't fail. You learned what not to do. Learning what not to do is how you learn to actually grow mushrooms. The more you do things that you're not supposed to do in mycology, the more you learn where you can bend and you can break rules. And then eventually you're going to be confident in operating. Nobody just wakes up day one and they're like, oh, I'm the world's greatest grower. The reason why it's so important to me to like get other people inspired in mycology is because I try to do everything in this space and I can't do everything by myself. In order to accomplish things, we need to collaborate with other people to do more than we can as individuals. And like the mycelium already does that itself. Two spores get together, they form a network, because at the end of the day, the more people there are that are doing my job, the more access people have to mushrooms. I don't look at other people as competitors in the space or people encroaching on what I do when they want to do the same thing. I see it as, ooh, another potential collaborator.
Cubensis tends to be a bit more rhizomorphic in its mycelium and the way it looks. A little more ropey, like kind of like thick strands, but generally exotic, it's not across the board, but exotic mycelium is more tomentose. So a little more stringy, a little more fluffy. And that just seems to be a characteristic. So that's not bad. That's not weak genetics. It's just different. So we've done a kind of like short introduction kind of doc video with one of the labs. And it's available on YouTube, so you can check it out. But when these are tested with HPLC, there are hits in the graph of the wavelengths of things that come up that we don't even know what it is. So mushrooms have this is just very new in general. And that, that's true for cubensis and exotics. But there are things that we just haven't discovered yet. And, mushrooms also have terpenes. So what role are the terpenes playing in how a mushroom may feel? And then if you combine that with all the other things that are going on in that mushroom, that goes to show when I mentioned the minor alkaloids, it's not just psilocybin and psilocin that's producing an effect. It's these minors that contribute to this entourage/ensemble effect that make a mushroom feel unique to itself, but also can make it feel very strong. And so this is just mushrooms in general, but it seems to be a little more pronounced with the exotics. And
pasteurized versus sterilized just comes out to a math problem on logistics. And usually it comes down to a cost saving thing or a time saving thing. And for me, it comes down to time more than cost, because time is the most precious resource in the world to me right now. And pasteurizing substrate takes less time and effort than sterilizing it. I'm also a big fan of thermophilic bacteria, even though I didn't understand how they work. I know they do. We get slightly more production out of pasteurized stuff than we do sterilized stuff.
So there's lots of ways that we can decide whether or not we want to do a full spectrum extraction or selective extraction. So these chromatographs here are going to help kind of explain and show the difference between a full spectrum extract and a selective extract. So you can see in our full spectrum extract, it looks very similar. We've got the same peaks and the same positions that we see in the biomass. Right, so the extract looks very similar to what we see in the biomass. Here's an example of an exotic fruit, just so you can see the difference. If you see these different peaks in here, this is why it can be important to utilize a full spectrum extraction process, so that you make sure that you're getting all these things that make it unique. Okay, so this is really important: full spectrum versus selective extraction. This is nothing new. This has been in the science world for a century. Full spectrum extraction, we're pulling all the soluble compounds out of the mushroom. If it's part of the mushroom and it's soluble, we want to pull everything out of it. This is a full spectrum extract. Selective extraction is when we're intentionally removing, or we're trying to avoid extracting unwanted compounds from the mushroom. A lot of people trim their mushrooms and will cut the bottom of it off that has a little bit of substrate on there. And people are just throwing away thousands of pounds of this trim because it's got substrate on it. You don't know how to use it. Utilizing waste and using every part of the fungi.
It's also interesting right now that cactus is not being looked at for therapeutic purposes. So if you go to these psychedelic conferences, it's all about mushrooms. Why cactus is not on that train is interesting, and it's because people just don't really know anything about psychedelic cactus. The testing is atrocious, or just entirely missing, and that's what I'll be talking about more today. So essentially, there's about a 50-year lapse in psychedelic cactus research. It started in the 60s and 70s with just a few guys, and they were lab testing a few cacti, a few columnar types, and beginning to find what was going on. The issue with their lab work is in the 60s and 70s, the tools that they were using to measure these chemicals are considered archaic today. And we really can't rely on the data from the 60s and 70s because none of that data was coupled with DNA. How do you know that that cactus that you lab tested that has that alkaloid constituency is that cactus? So when it comes to strain names, what do you think people are going to call this thing? Echinopsis trichocereus progesii var monstrosa var cristata var variegata longform? No. Therefore, I'm naming it androdelic. Androdelic stands for androgynous psychedelic, one name. So if you had the vertical morphology, the horizontal morphology, and the color morphology, you can have an androdelic, a triple morphological psychedelic cactus. So it's a red-headed San Pedro. And so a part of this event is more than just seeing who has the coolest stuff, who has the best stuff. We're actually like making scientific history here with what we're doing.
Medicine is in the amount, it's in the intentions, it's in the setting. These experiences can just be like the insight that someone had that tied together 4 or 5 years of therapy. And it could be like, oh, okay, now I can kind of connect the dots. Mushrooms are the building blocks for the environment. So we can always be looking to nature for models of like how balance can play out in life. Specifically growing for consistency and quality. So we won't even grow mushrooms beyond a certain point because we're trying to have a repeatable experience as much as we can dial in. Of course, this natural medicine has that kind of air to it where it's not really completely repeatable, but we want people to know that the quality of medicine is something that they can repeatedly find from us. And we're just really kind of concentrating on smaller batches, slower movement, and just more care behind the production.
Then fast forward to the mid-20th century, the 1950s and 60s. That's when modern science began to seriously engage with psychedelics. Researchers were studying compounds like LSD and psilocybin in clinical settings. And what they were seeing was promising. There were early signs that these substances could help with depression, with addiction, with trauma. There was curiosity, there was momentum, there was this sense that maybe something important was unfolding. But then everything stopped. Not gradually, almost overnight. Because psychedelics became associated with counterculture movements, with political unrest, with things that the system didn't know how to control. And when something feels unpredictable, systems tend to shut it down. So the response wasn't, let's understand this better. It was, let's stop this. Research disappeared. Funding disappeared. The field went quiet. Not because we had all the answers, but because we stopped asking the questions. Big ideas don't fail because they're wrong. They get delayed until the world is ready to support them. The difference now is that we have a chance to be ready. We have better science, better tools, better infrastructure. So maybe this time, we don't have to wait hundreds of years. Maybe this time, we build it right and we build it faster. Because when the signal changes, when people start to listen, what once felt impossible starts becoming inevitable.
It's a combination of really caring and really trying. It wouldn't work without both of those. If you really care, but then you don't really try, can we really be proud of that? Not really. And it wouldn't make sense to say you were a really good mechanic if you were really passionate, but then you didn't have any tools. Wouldn't make any sense. So it's about trying and then also having the passion, so passion and the tools to get what you want done. But there's kind of a special circumstance where sometimes people care so much that they can just do things. They don't have to do it the right way. They don't have to do it anyway, really. They just care so much that they make it happen. And that's kind of what the Psychedelic Club of Denver has been for a long time, was people who cared so much that no obstacle could stop it. Absolutely nothing. It started from just a group of 5 friends to a group of 50 friends to a group of 500 friends. The trouble with passion is that it's a little bit of a trap, because if you commit yourself so deep and then you lose that passion, that's burnout. You can't succeed anymore. So for a long time, the club relied on finding new passionate people who could sink everything into the club and make it happen. And as we've grown, it's become inevitable that there will be gaps. It's become inevitable that we can't just rely on 1, 2, or 3 people to make this organization run. So we did something really hard, and we stepped back a little bit over the last couple months. You might have noticed that the offerings at our events were a little more minimal than they used to be. You might have noticed we booked less speakers than usual, and we put effort into things that we knew worked. So socials, potlucks, and things that were really good for the community that didn't put burnout on us as board members. And after stepping back for a little bit and getting some breathing room, I'm incredibly proud to announce that I think we're finally ready to get back to it. I used to work at a day camp, and there's kind of a special moment for a lot of kids when they kind of have their first moment of consciousness of like, oh, I actually want to do this thing. And you can see it because their teachers want them to do things and their parents want them to do things, and then I want them to do things, but then eventually they do a thing and they put the work into it. And, you know, for example, there's a kid who he wasn't nearly as good at soccer as the other kids, but he would stay with me and he would learn how to shoot in soccer so that he could hang out with the other kids. And when he was done, I think he realized after he succeeded that that was the first thing that he self-generated wanted to do. He wanted to do it. And it was really beautiful.
Colorado's first legal cannabis consumption lounge has closed its doors. Now, it's entering a new chapter. Due to Colorado state law, a single location cannot hold both a cannabis license and a natural medicine license at the same time. So, with a heavy heart, the coffee joint surrendered its cannabis consumption license to become a psilocybin-focused healing center. The coffee joint will soon become Almados Denver, a non-clinical psilocybin healing center focused primarily on low-dose experiences, education, and community-based programming. And this isn't just a rebrand. It's a glimpse into the future. Let's look back through the looking glass to when Colorado voters approved the legalization of recreational cannabis on November 6, 2012, through Amendment 64, making it legal for adults over 21 to possess and use cannabis.
This is something you're going to tell your kids about. This is something you're going to tell your grandkids about.
As supporters of Amendment 64 learned, Colorado voters approved the historic ballot initiative to make marijuana legal in the state. Cheers erupted in the Pro 64 headquarters late Tuesday night.
And we went up against an incredibly powerful political machine in this state, and we took our power.
This is part of a much larger shift. Just like cannabis lounges were once experimental, psychedelic healing centers are now entering that same early stage. And once again, Colorado is becoming a testing ground, not just for legalization, but for integration. Unlike cannabis, Colorado's natural medicine program hasn't expanded overnight. And that's intentional. Nearly 3.5 years after legalization, the rollout has been slower and more deliberate, focused on safety, structure, and long-term impact.
Still a lot of mystery around DMT. And I should say too, a lot of the interest in DMT is kind of from a very kind of like woo angle. Like a lot of the experts in DMT believe DMT is like a portal to alternate dimensions, and that it actually helps you like enter into other metaverses and dimensions and talk to real beings that are maybe here or maybe in other universes or whatever. I personally don't believe in any of that, but whether you believe in that stuff or not, these classes are really just focused on what is known about the pharmacology, what is known about the chemistry, what is known about the science. Yeah, in that 5-month training, we also did an extended piece with Ben Malcolm, the spirit pharmacist, who's done some of the best work about understanding exactly what is happening in your body with DMT and what it's doing to those serotonin 2A receptors, and also trying to understand where else are the mechanisms of action in your brain. So again, nobody knows even probably half of what is really happening when you use DMT, but we focus on what is known. Yeah, my name's Tony Shawcross. I'm one of the co-founders of the Colorado Psychedelic Practitioners Cohort. It's a group of now over 750 current and aspiring psychedelic practitioners, facilitators, people who really care about psychedelics from the angle of mental health. So yeah, it's a group of some therapists, some psychologists, psychiatrists, some coaches.
Getting people together, connected, and just talking about mushrooms and talking about other things. They gave us the opportunity with Prop 122 to do this beautiful thing.
I think that's fascinating is how it sort of turns up the gain of your internal world, allowing you to almost project it external to witness your own insights just showing around you on the room. The fascinating aspect is the amount of control you have over these experiences and how like just internal adjustments can directly influence your physical environment, make your physical environment reflect back into you.
Dream. And that you could, for example, have the power within one night to dream 75 years of time.
This song's called Lost Again.
Honestly, I'm really just happy that people are having a conversation about some of these things, right? They've always been a part of our environment, but now we're kind of out in the open and we're talking about it more. So it's, like I said, it's really cool to be here and be a part of the community. And I really like to see a lot of the lab results. I'm really big on seeing the lab results and transparency. You know, it's we're taking it a step further. It's no longer, well, there's 1 or 2 grams of mushrooms in this chocolate bar. Now we're talking milligrams of active components, right? And I think that's really cool to see, and it just helps bring the education aspect to the field, right? You know, we're seeing it in real time. So, like I said, it's just great to be here.
What up? What up? I'm Dave. I'm here with PanHeads, Aaron, Kyle. We're here. We make substrate for exotic mushrooms. And
hi, I'm Tyrell from Humble Human Farms. Right now, I'm just excited for the amount of community we have, how much knowledge is being shared, how freely things are being shared, and how close we're bringing so many people.
Yeah, I think we just had a really successful marketplace here. We're excited for the Cup Awards tonight. But yeah, we educated a lot of people about the testing results, how to interpret our COAs, and you know the cool things we have going, like a CU study and our lemon tech study. Reach out to Triptomics if you'd like to learn more.
Hi, I'm Jay. I believe that people should grow their own mushrooms at home and their own food as well.
So I'm just trying to make it affordable, specifically affordable for people to get into it and start doing the thing at home. And like, I believe that when you grow your medicine, it kicks it up a notch. Like, it really brings in awareness for how important it is, the work that gets done here, and how much it needs to get done. Keep doing what we're doing right now. Honestly, it looks like the Renaissance is still happening, even though there's so much going out there that we can complain about. There's also a lot of good going on, especially here in Colorado.
There's definitely art in this industry and just the science aspect. You know, people paint really cool things. The Shroomski events are dope to see really cool paintings. In the live competition, we saw so much diversity in what these fruit look like. These should be competitions. We should have art. So if you guys have ideas on, like, I think, you know, biggest gill, fattest stem, skinniest stem, fattest cap, the skinniest cap, like, you can make all kinds of cool competitions out of this that are unique. And it's like, yeah, you're looking for that mushroom all year and you're like, hey, I really think this is the small, or like, this has the thinnest gill versus the thickest gill. You save it for that type of competition. Next year we'll have a huge room for 1,000 samples in there. It'll be the biggest display of cool mushroom samples.
Conversation isn't just about first, second, and third place in the context of highest numbers. We also want to consider things like average potency, something that's middle of the pack, or one of my favorite categories, lowest.
So those are unique genetics out there. We need to preserve the unique genetics. So for those of you that are making unique genetics out there, who know who you are, keep doing it, because it is the land races that are currently around. They may not be the original ones that were around, 100 years ago when ancestors were consuming these, but they are currently a preservation in our current genetic pool. And you have something special and unique, hang on to it, preserve it in some way, because as a society, we tend to chase highest in certain things. Cannabis being a great example, where we've moved to compounds that are just, we're looking for one thing, it begins to smell the same, do the same thing. And the original kind of preservation, then the magic, as Chris likes to say, in the medicine is lost in some ways.
We had 44 samples. I almost want to say it was 48 by the time I finally took out all the data and did the thing. I don't think I updated this. Ranged from a 1/4 milligram per package up to 50 milligrams per package. Average range of just things on a shelf is like, well, it's got 1/4 of one or 50 of those, like same package. This year, we're introducing the pass-fail aspect of it, because that's something the natural medicine came out with. We learned what is an acceptable range. I think 15% is great. 10% is even better. 5% is really cool. If you're under 1%, you're the best. Like, something to brag about. 6 out of 44 would have failed over that 15% variance. And 7 samples had less than 1% variance. When you think like 1% variance is, I make a 1 milligram product, the most variance is 1.01 or 0.99. That's the variance of that dosing. And it's like, yeah, that's consistent.
He may know a thing or two about cacti. I'll let you say something.
I get to say something?
You get to say something.
I've judged cannabis competitions around the country and around the world for over 20 years, and I've never had an opportunity to compete because I was always the judge. This is the first time I've ever won. Thank you, Chip Travis. Thank you, Psychotherapist, for making this possible. Thank all of you. Oh my God, we're making this great here together. This is so cool. Thank you guys so freaking much.
This cup was exciting to me because we saw more varieties of mushrooms than ever, but we saw more species. There's over 200 species that produce psilocybin. Some of them throw truffles, or philosopher's stones, they call it. And so that idea is basically those truffles you'd buy in Amsterdam are super low potency. That's what those sclerotia are.
Thank you, sir. I mean, literally, as you were going, I'm saying yes. I hope I remember to reflect on that. Yep. But most of all, thank you, and your listeners will thank you for sharing a bit of your story and being vulnerable and sharing your struggles. I mean, that's you could kind of take away everything we talked about, but it's And that goes back to community. When others can hear our struggles and they know they're not alone, especially with depression where you really feel alone and isolated. But so much of what you said resonated. Peeling back the onion, not feeling comfortable in our skin. And this really resonates with me, that we are not our careers, we are not our jobs, right? I mean, and that's something that in our modern world is a challenge to reconcile, which 10,000 years ago was not a thing. Just wasn't a thing. We're in a westernized, colonialized, commercialized, capitalized world. We can complain about that or be upset about that, but the best way is to make peace with it. I'm not saying I've mastered that, but now that I kind of see through that lens, it's easier for me to make peace with it. Back to my story, my epiphany was not feeling passionate in my career. It was based on career and money and financial success and all that stuff that, we need dollars to pay our bills, but that's a lot different than rooting our identity in those areas. And I think that's some of what you were speaking to.
Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to Cheshire Corners. Tell me what you think in the comments. And as always, don't get psyched out.